Okay, in this video, we're going to go over population growth patterns and ecological succession. But first, a quick review on survivorship. Okay, what type of survivorship curve is this? So the orange is the type 1. Looks like things seem to not die, organisms not die very quickly at first, and they live a long, full life. And then at the end, maybe some of them then start to drop off. And then survivorship type curve 3 is where there's a high infant mortality. This could be like when you're planting your garden seeds, not a lot of the sprouts end up growing into full plants, but then they might survive to their maximum lifespan once they become full plants. And then the type 2, which is somewhere in between. Okay, a lot of I think dinosaur types were type 2, lizards and stuff like that. Chickens, perhaps that type 2. Okay, so example, elephants usually have successful birth rates and they live a long time in the wild, especially if they're not being poached and they're being protected. What type of survivorship curve is that? Yep, that's type 1 because they survive a longer time, and then of course if they get older, they might start completing the circle of life. All right, so now we're talking about population and growth patterns, and they should be fairly predictable, actually, in nature. Something that's going to change a population size could be immigration, births, the birth rate, how many are being born, emigration, that's how many are leaving, and how many die. Okay? So it's always changing. These are the 4 factors that could possibly affect it. So what does that mean? Immigration, that means animals coming in, you're adopting them. Just kidding. Wandering into an area, maybe because they had to emigrate from another region. So that might increase the population density. And emigration means animals are leaving or exiting an area. Perhaps they're just finding better hunting grounds, or they're finding a place where they might get more resources and nutrition and such. So that might decrease the population in an area or population density. Okay. Population growth is based on the available resources. So exponential growth is population growth that is not inhibited by anything. It's not limited by anything. It has an abundance of resources like tons of food and no natural predators, right? So rabbits are a great example of that because they breed quite successfully in the wild. 2 rabbits can make up to 14 babies at a time. So you have that exponential curve. And even though it starts out a little slow, over time, all those bunny rabbits are going to make a lot of babies. Here, let me show you a little example. 2 bunny rabbits can, make tons of little babies. And in those cases, they're only showing 5, but after like 14 weeks, this is going to be 15. And then after several weeks, 14 more weeks, later, because the gestational period is just 14 weeks. They can have tons more babies after a year and a half. 180 rabbits could be born. This might be having some brothers and sisters having babies with each other, but in the wild, sometimes that happens. Okay, so if they have no natural predators, right? If there's natural predators, then it's going to get limited. And instead of an exponential growth, your bunny rabbit population might have more of a logistic growth, kind of a very wide S curve. So instead of shooting straight up without any limits and quickly over time, now we're going to have it reach its carrying capacity, which means we can't have over a certain number of organisms, because the wolves and the foxes or whatever the natural predator is going to snatch them up and eat them up. And then the wolves and fox population will probably increase, even though these bunny rabbits keep having lots of babies or trying to. Okay, so the other thing that could limit population growth and make it more logistic would be food supply. So if we're probably going to run out of carrots and plants and other natural food for these little herbivore rabbits, so probably won't have exponential growth forever. In fact, they could probably eat way too many grasses and eat up all the plants in an area, and then there's no plants to make baby plants, and they actually might overgraze an area, and then you're going to see the population really decline because there's not enough food. But for now, hopefully it'll be a healthy, limited carrying capacity, usually with some good natural predators, and to keep the population from getting out of control, right? Maybe also safe places for the bunny rabbits to hide too. That's going to protect your population. And And for example, number of individuals for the area, carrying capacity, that's the maximum number of individuals that could exist in this area. Maybe this is fish that could, population could increase exponentially if they weren't being eaten. Okay, so over time, that could limit a population. Also, it could have a disease or something that might limit it, or maybe limited rainfall. So there isn't as much water in the area. That could limit a carrying capacity. All right, so it could be food shortage, it could be a natural disaster or catastrophic event that's going to limit the population in a place. Okay, so ecological factors that could limit population growth. Number of limiting factors, anything that keeps the size of a population down or limits a population. One type could be what's called density dependent. We could categorize it into something that depends on the size of that population. So the more individuals, the more they're going to be affected by this factor. So this is an example of maybe moose and wolves in an area. What could limit it? Well, probably food could limit it, and depends. So density dependent factors could also mean how many predators there are in the area, or how much competition for food, right? The wolf and the moose population. As the wolf population increases, then the moose population might decrease here. See that? The moose population decreases, though, and then there aren't as many moose around to have baby moose. Yeah, then the wolf population may decline until the moose population can kind of recover. Okay, so it's going to have this little relationship where it's not going to be exponential for long. Eventually, it's going to be limited. And yeah, you'll have an increase in one, the other one can increase, and then eventually it may have to decrease. All right, so parasites and diseases are also density dependent factors, because if you have a lot of moose around in one area, they will be close to each other and they probably will spread disease a little bit easier. Okay, because of the not social distancing, right? So density dependent factors could be parasites or diseases that can affect the lifespan of the population. Okay, so density independent factors are factors that are not dependent on how many of that organism you have. Okay, so if we can brainstorm some, maybe you can think of some. Here's some here. Unusual weather. All right, so maybe rainfall. That could be really high. You could have flooding, natural disasters. You could have earthquakes. You could have fires, forest fires. You can have maybe a volcanic eruption in an area. And that doesn't depend on how many organisms are there. It's just going to happen and affect it. Perhaps maybe it could be man-made, like logging in a certain area. And then it didn't depend on how many barn owls there were. It's just going to limit the number of barn owls, or owls, probably not barn owls, but possibly. Because, if your owls are living in trees, then they'll have less trees to live in. And there'll be less places for some of the animals to hide. So maybe that's something that could contribute to limiting population, but it doesn't depend on how dense the population is. Maybe you can think of a few more. All right. So thank you. Now you know. All right. Join us next time when we talk about some other ecological factors that can affect the population size. And I hope you're having a great weekend. Talk to you later.